Well, I want to talk about your resiliency here, Erik Kramer here on the Boxer and Girls and Guest Line. We'll get you out with this. Your book, The Ultimate Comeback, Surviving a Suicide Attempt, Conquering Depression, and Living with a Purpose. Now, this is a deep story here. And we don't mess around with suicide. We've heard Bernie Kosar's story. We've had him on about all the surgeries, concussions, some of the relapses he had. Erik, what was it about? Was it retirement? Was it not playing the game? What led to some of these events here, and which led you to write the book about it?
Well, when you're talking about suicide, that was a suicide attempt. Anyway, that was what happened to me when I was overwhelmed, literally overwhelmed by a series of tragic family events. Starting, my son Griffin had actually been in rehab, drug rehab, in 10th grade in high school.
Wow!
And so he was, he kind of ran the gamut. Where why am I here? To thanks that you got me here, to, oh, that was brainwashing. And then by the time he got out of outpatient program, he went to high school at Thousand Oaks High School, which he then went right back to struggling in school again. And so eventually he relapsed, and it was a heroin overdose, and so he eventually one morning didn't wake up.
Oh,
and
sorry to hear that. Oh, God.
And yeah, and then my mom had, prior to that, the year before, or actually earlier that year. So Griffin passed away October 30th, 2011. Earlier that year, the day after Mother's Day, my mom found out she had stage 4 uterine cancer. And that in itself was an ordeal. And she survived a ridiculous operation where she then afterward had to go through, a lot of chemotherapy. And, and it was during that time, actually, when she and I got close. And then, eventually she went into remission, and eventually her cancer came back. And so she passed away in July of the following year. And then right around that time, my dad, who I was never really close with, but eventually around that time my mom passed away, he had some untreated acid reflux. So those of you out there that do get it, treat it, because his went untreated, which then turned into esophageal cancer, which was like a 3-year decline. Jeez. Like steady decline. And then Dylan, my younger son, he wasn't living with me at the time either. And so, it was I hate to say it was events that conspired against me,
right,
but it was. And it wasn't like I wasn't seeing a therapist,
right,
at various stages, but eventually I stopped. And it didn't take long after that before I literally remember driving down the road one day, and it was like this little feeling that I had before. When depression comes, there's like a knock at the door, but the door comes swinging open. Like it's like a fog or a flood that comes in that you cannot, resist. So anyway, that just basically at that time led me on a downward spiral that I couldn't get out of. And, it's like when you play a sport or when you commit yourself to something, there's always the process of working through it, right? So you're always sort of building up some resilience as you go, which is kind of how that all happened. It wasn't like I never sought out treatment, therapy. I had in different times in my life. But anyway, so that's what happened. And then eventually, I lost all perspective and lost my wits, really, and conspired to, research out the best way to do this, which was what I did. Shoot myself underneath my chin. And fortunately, we're still here, and I'm talking about this.
Yeah.
Wow. Because I do not feel the same way I once did. That was, 9 years ago almost. And so times have certainly changed. And as it says, I'm living with a purpose, and I would say multiple purposes. But it's been an ordeal. But I really have to thank not only the doctors who saved my life, but the many people who were there throughout that time.
Wow.
And still are.
Wow, Erik, man. Well, we're proud of you for fighting through that. That's not easy. It doesn't sound easy. Sounds heavy. The ultimate comeback, surviving a suicide attempt, conquering depression, and living with a purpose. We're glad that you're living with multiple purposes.